Cooidjagh as giaull Claare.
Bevalliam Jewish Altager gus Claare na Gael. My name is Robert Cutting Carswell, Robert a Carslach.
Haven't heard tell of Owl Bobby Bob.
And this bilingual programme is called Claare na Gael. And in it you'll hear the English language, as on genius, Nishu Clashen and Gilg. And in it too you'll hear the Manx Gaelic, Chinian Amera, the mother tongue of Ellen Vanning, the Isle of Man. As Bannacht and Durish. We've been finding out about the history of Anthony Dunlop, a Scot who came to the island and farmed in Onken before buying Ballakilley in Marown in 1828, and he renamed that property Ellerslie. He was renowned as an agriculturalist and was chosen as a member of the House of Keys. Tandunya emsich M Renfield, na Horrensach ons Tai Benrich, Fostura and Dr John Seward. Va imeri Ushigan ag Renfield, ach renni awa dolju, as chynyeris donne de veli jit de ve ching. We start with something we unsuccessfully tried to start with a week or two ago, dance music from Brittany with Mike James and Yves LeBlanc. Tashu geestjachrish radio vanning station en asjoen, viskol skyljena was stulish alien vanning.
Coup de talon et frappez dans vos mains, faites demi-tour, écoutez la musique.
Trois coups de talon et frappez dans vos mains, faites demi-tour et dansez la polka.
Trois coups de talon et frappez dans vos mains, faites demi-tour, écoutez la musique.
Trois coups de talon et frappez dans vos mains, faites demi-tour et dansez la polka.
Trois coups de talon et frappez dans vos mains, faites demi-tour, écoutez la musique.
Trois coups de talon et frappez dans vos mains, faites demi-tour et dansez la polka.
Trois coups de talon et frappez dans vos mains, faites demi-tour, écoutez la musique.
Trois coups de talon et frappez dans vos mains, faites demi-tour et dansez la polka.
Main au genou, main au côté, les bras croisés, frappant du pied, tapant les mains. Amusons-nous, jeunes fillettes, amusons-nous jusqu'à demain. Main au genou, main au côté, les bras croisés, frappant du pied, tapant les mains. Amusons-nous, jeunes fillettes, amusons-nous jusqu'à demain. Main au genou, main au côté, les bras croisés, frappant du pied, tapant les mains. Amusons-nous, jeunes fillettes, amusons-nous jusqu'à demain. Main au genou, main au côté, les bras croisés, frappant du pied, tapant les mains. Amusons-nous, jeunes fillettes, amusons-nous jusqu'à demain. Amusons-nous, jeunes fillettes, nous n'aurons plus le temps demain.
Chatoula, chatoula, chatoula la, tu verras comme ça la fera rire. Chatoula, chatoula, chatoula la, tu verras comme elle rigolera. Tu verras comme ça la fera rire, tu verras comme elle rigolera. Chatoula, chatoula, chatoula la, tu verras comme ça la fera rire. Chatoula, chatoula, chatoula la, tu verras comme elle rigolera. Tu verras comme ça la fera rire, tu verras comme elle rigolera. Chatoula, chatoula, chatoula la, tu verras comme ça la fera rire. Chatoula, chatoula, chatoula la, tu verras comme elle rigolera. tu verras comme ça la fera rire, tu verras comme elle rigolera. Chatoula, chatoula, chatoula la, tu verras comme ça la fera rire, chatoula, chatoula, chatoula la, tu verras comme elle rigolera, tu verras comme ça la fera rire, tu verras comme elle rigolera, tu verras comme ça la fera rire, tu verras comme elle rigolera.
Yves Leblanc on clarinet and voice, and Mike James on accordion, with some Breton polkas. This article about Anthony Dunlop is by John Simpson. It was printed in the Peel City Guardian in 1899, reprinted from the Glasgow Herald. Anthony Dunlop's first farming endeavour in the island was Banks Howe in Onken, which he farmed from about 1808 to about 1820. That's when he had the opportunity to buy Ballakilley, which he renamed Ellerslie. Things had been going well for Anthony Dunlop, but then Mr. Banks raised proceedings against him, complaining about the condition in which he'd left Banks Howe. The article here suggests that this was unfair, but Anthony Dunlop had the worry of dealing with all that. Anthony Dunlop had bought Ballakilley under the impression that it wasn't subject to tithes. However, then Bishop George Murray issued proceedings for payment of tithes for the period 1820 to 1828. Unfortunately, Anthony Dunlop had undertaken major works on Ellerslie, and now was forced to borrow large amounts of money. An fidu le Gerasauri, 9 p.m. Hug me opiate ledger der Renfield, taus de lure de chor eer ersen cadla, as gauw me soel a lior scriwi de jenori. Sledden is tonight we getlach me giet me inchen erich, as te prowelus gint jen shiltnus. Tan fair benrich dun voor agem, je kaint njau gajen. Be femem crew fo rein no han, as cor ersen fair benrich zo fegach, ieder ridden bio. Nevis en mien lesh shen de hoestjach wildien bio is as odyssey, as te a nullige hien de huline on zach chimsy. Hug immer die kachwulligen de duoli, as immer die duolien de ushig, as eich ve giri ket de immer die ushigen. Kreeg weg de kemen sorge hegge. Weg few bonnes de goud bear vrouwelus, voor die de berg gent de berg ach or de loer aan. Ren deinje genoux ganadus giarre bio, ach, gichernirsen Jew. The FRIEL sisters are from Glasgow, but with strong Donegal connections. Here they sing about Chonaill.
O lovely Chonaill, I am now far away from your blue misty mountains and white spreading vales. I am far from my country, far, far from my home. But once back in old Ireland, I will never more roam. Could I but see the green fields of Giaull, or to gaze at the forelands and grey Arranmore, or to roam through the roses, so peaceful and free. Every spot in that valley seems dearer to me. I'd give all of the wealth that around me I see for sixpence. Farewell to the roses, farewell to giaull, farewell to the forelands and grey Arran moor, 'neath the stars and the stripes I am now bound to rest, far away from my home in Chonaill the best.
The FRIEL sisters cheer Chonaill. Cren fair nach cor séans ai sa chúis smooth dolly a slen fair moil, and tusja machon na inchin. De rauw en foliach je eer fair je lid an inchin, de rauw tiggelis je shiltness eer unfair benrich, fuddy de vodem cor ai banglen séans pien, gus mullach, casolerish na vel physioliach Burden Sanderson, na tusja inchin ferrier ach weg. De rauw ach or de loer aan. Zijn thou gin smuljen so rauwer, man a vel meer me violige. Fuddy de jinnach or mai, cor a vai gul herish me han. Son nach wat intjen Sint Cagenis, ve nies, rare me goeges. Kreeg meiren en dunje resuna maag, nach hedden de vier wijnrit de cooidjagh, tjoustai in remesok. Tammy Gindus kreewoord bios te Choorleeg dunje. Tammy Gindus kreewoord bios te Choorleeg dunje ne wel in vegach nen. Te chorkion a groentes fijirach, as dew te een ontoyach a cortus no. When the crisis was approaching, writes John Simpson, he told part of his troubles in confidence to James Grierson, a Dumfriesshire gentleman who had some business with the island and was a frequent visitor at Ellerslie. Arrangements were made for meeting the impending crash, and the compatriots agreed to stand by one another. Suddenly, and without warning, at the end of April 1828, Mr. Dunlop left for Scotland. A month later, he wrote from Edinburgh to Mr. Grierson, explaining that circumstances had occurred which induced him to leave the Isle of Man, and might render his return very uncertain. He concluded with the assurance that Mr. Grierson wouldn't suffer any inconvenience through what he had undertaken to do for him, and that he had left in his wife's hands all necessary documents in due order. His friend, Mr. Grierson, was alarmed at the tone of this letter, and was anxious, if possible, to render assistance. The twin fiddles of Davy and Dyer from Cornwall, and Lano.
Manx Radio.
Seo dú stasiwn yn asiwn, y sien na greif radio fannin. Ond seo tas yw geisiach rys Claare na Gael, Merenpeen, Robert Cutting Carswell, Robert a Carslach.
Did the other hear tell of old Bobby Bob?
Mr. Grierson wrote at once enclosing a cheque for £50, which he hoped might be of service. But the cheque was never cashed. To the claims of the Manx creditors, such a sum was merely a drop in the bucket. For the next month, Mr. Dunlop was practically in concealment, though some of his relatives knew quite well where he was. On the morning of the 29th of June 1828, he was found dead in the bedroom he had occupied for a night or two previously in an Edinburgh hotel. This was the end of a life which was pleasant and useful in many of its aspects, though the good fortune it appeared to deserve persistently avoided it. Mr. Dunlop showed high ability, refined taste, and the desire to make all happy with whom he came into contact. But he was deficient in that hardness known as worldly wisdom. His gentleness and unselfishness prevented him from being able to make a bargain in his own favour, and he would rather yield to extortion than resist it. Cre wardjin viscoil taiach der cortus no leis dachle noe of Joasign. Dus te jin a rauweach jay, de denkjere me Joos schammers me chreist no, as de firnjach de gami taiach der cortus no. Ma saw be a deravis and recortus a moor, genoux tausjim, as duna maljor junti leis taus vis karsna, Nicole. Oh, Lucy, Lucy, cha nodam ve corrirut, na corrirish machar a noder, as tan man zegge eds. Ach, cha nodam mach furrachten gintreis as avrige. Avrige, avrige. De rauwem mach kush choleidje as machara bach benrich on shen. Kush fein jou gondach de chor arm avrige. Weg shen manrus de jaru. Lorlei Mina Murray, and Sheolai is feed Jerasauri. Tammy neach, as te cunige me de choritten ons vogelen mihin on shaw. Te gurish sancherach rompien, as geishach ag an ontrei. As de rydyn ach nis mych yon cawrach gier sgriw ys genoux niaw chas le yr sgriw foglen. Smee van er tammy mych yon Lucy is mych yon Jonathan. Chonaill mi echlasen vai Jonathan rish tamalt, as tammy fee vorich. Ach, Jay, hug manche Hawkins wien as de cooidjagh chodui, skriwen weisen. Rembi skriwrish, braiach Jay rawe echlasen weg. As doet de rauw nuva chastai kate en gedden. Chonaill linje as deit vai Castile Dracula, as te greide vai kaat gol toiach der chitawalia. Chonaill shannon ach kajinek Jonathan, chonaill mi tiggle, as te cord niaw orum. Nis, ta Lucy greide veli chuslentoil, eng oil toiach der een shan oshek, shul na kadla. Ten voirek lotrum mylchion, as ta sin na reiche de ginum cord doris a chemer ein glas dag i. Ta aieg benasje Westenra de vel shuleder an nee, gulmaak mullion tai, as herish oir na eenenen. John Simpson concludes his article with the observation that there seems something amiss when a fate like his is all that the world has in reserve for men who are endowed with such honourable qualities. The Scottish name he gave his Manx estate recalls the tragedy of his life, and those who know the story of his misfortunes are no longer surprised at the occurrence of the name Ellerslie in Man. So, Ellerslie used to be Ballakilley, the church farm by St Runius's, the old church of Marown. The name Ellerslie was chosen by the new Scottish owner in 1820, Anthony Dunlop, because it was the name of the birthplace of great Scottish patriot Sir William Wallace, from whom he claimed descent. Success was followed by a sudden decline, and Anthony Dunlop's death in 1828, leaving significant debts, is the reason that the Reverend Thomas Stephen made this remark in A Poetical Guide to the Isle of Man in 1832 about Dunlop's Ellerslie, left in the lurch. Now to the Welsh male voice choral tradition, with Cor Meibion Ponter Delais. Cormebion Ponterdillais. With the death of Anthony Dunlop in 1828, the farm name seems to have gone back to Ballakilley for 5 years, until its subsequent owner, a Mr Falder, fixed its name as Ellerslie again, and that's how it's remained from 1833 onwards. From Ellerslie, though, the Reverend Thomas Stephen looked back down into the valley to see the handsome farm and mansion in the vale, and this is glossed as a note that it's Ballakilley Moor. You may remember that there was a reference about looking to the little church and to Ellerslie, and I said the little church was glossed as Ballakilley Moor. There is a fine keel site on Ballakilley Moor, but that it would hardly be seen, and it seemed more likely that the little church was St Runius, particularly with a reference to Ellerslie. Well, so much for being clever. I see that the note about the little church is actually glossed as Marown. My eye had jumped ahead to this reference, looking down from Ellerslie to Ballakilley Moor. As eist ha chit de vei dústal tajamach, as tujum vai leis aim de vich reistéil, vis a chinel lolium magit. Vach vien, de doeg is ach die borrich me gaan Lucy, as die ginst out de rauw en onnoosjek en dunje sheshek, Lucy. De jinnach ei iris en nie, as cormush as golmach, maar a rauw stap cooidjagh. Hig Lucy de vei poest sen jouwer. As Hannah ti planol lagunanek, as an acht bein tayak rechid. Ta risha murray, no de vel mish genoux rid chedden. Ach, ni Jonathan as mish gol tayak der vei ein cooidjagh on zach fin jou kramp, as biarame cor eb reren in urgid. Hig manche homewood, she an honor royal Arthur homewood, mac inrichen and char and godalming, de saw de gerrid. Her leers vis care de Gael and Balia. All na vel an ereg ar ó vai, as liam de vel Lucy wien kunta na tuchen der a vis chit. Scottish band Deaf Shepherd.
Manx Radio.
Stasiwn yn asiwnt yn eisio radio fannin. Sé Claare na Gael vis golar skelje na cartnish, mish Robert Cutting Carswell, Robert a Carslach.
Have you ever had tell of old Bobby Bob?
Ty giri corleshe gus yn vink een in a rullik, as Jean there, Eilid Whitby. Jaren den een forrachten vis burori. Bi cat de luri tred ve te raschen. En schachteleis fi Jerasauri. Gin naich vai Jonathan. Tammy chit de wei brau burrich marchion. Na jaig gesummers orbi. Ach, salium de vier de ginnach schreeuw. Man a rauweich onlinje. Ta Lucy schul na smenken of riu. As dag tammy magusta ljori as ish glaciige magieten chema. De heig oil, getjeest een Hampshire na wadi chit de wei voer. Ach fausten im nee as wei magusta de cooidjagh goldtaich de uniworm. As ta machine chit de wei burrich as gin kadla. Buiste G, ta slentwaig Lucy vos. Va aimed al tajamer manche homewood de golgus ring, lesh fshilje neregge, as chingus trom chit Ta Lucy goilori eg en chumrail vagene, ach genelli genoux en chumeg. And so, Ballakilley moor. The handsome farm and mansion in the vale, well wooded, scorns the tempest and the gale, environed with rich gardens, trees, a lawn, pleasing to visit at the early dawn. Behind it, to the westward, a retreat, where nature smiles enthroned in a rural state. A glen well planted with umbrageous trees, a sweet recess that no intruder sees, save such as are permitted to partake of the chaste pleasures of the peaceful lake, on whose green margin wave the feathery firs, and whose smooth bosom scarce a ripple stirs, save when the trout, to tell that he's alive, starts up and plunges with a sudden dive. Well, this will be Glen Darrach, that's the former corn mill with its fairly recently restored water wheel. But behind that, and back up the glen, apart from the mill race for the corn mill, is a good stand of trees surrounding a pond fed by a stream which flows down, ultimately, I suppose, from the Archalagan area. From the Breton-Manx collaboration, which came together so successfully at Chonaill the other year, this is Near Naissant.
Du sande ned i øyene, jeg kan eie løvenan, jeg kan eie løvenan. Løvenan, jeg sti, veier gannen over biri.
Gael shoot Israel, Glen Glaihat Vohadite, Joseph Quaiva Ekbakek, Mama shoot Jumana.
Zo jouwantjes conduit maar. Zo jouwantjes conduit maar. Villa zo erbij. Zo jouwantjes val conduire. En beetje lies a pistol. En la droye vira vegnol, en la droye vira vegnol. Mutus que verbra dieris, a caribou viria avanti. Pembe vetier lies a pistol. En le droye vira vermorel. En droyo vira virmo. Mutus que ventier l'ervoise. Ragi d'ivoire zovodie.
Welchen des Akten vorgewundren hat sen Michel, jen galida vorgeweit trages mudden sail. Jay Sheilach en Clon Israel Hink, Sheilach en Krishna John, ligt du not volgehotel, organisms gre. Amen.
The collaboration between Mira Royal and David Kilgallen with Laure Landau and Thomas Moisson. Drive on, urges the Reverend Stephen. You come to Ayrton's Gothic towers. Now we say Ayrton these days, I think it may be Ayrton was the original, but we'll come to that. It's interesting that he mentions Ayrton or Ayrton because the Reverend Stephen's poem is dated 1832, and you'd expect Ayrton's Gothic towers or Ayrton's Gothic towers to be a reference to Ayrton Castle. And I've seen that dated as 1834, but presumably it must have been a building early enough for the Reverend Stephen to have been aware of it, so that it was all ready to be opened as a school run on strict Church of England religious grounds. The design was by the Reverend Robert Aitken, 1799 to 1873, who was also responsible for the Crosby Chapel down at the crossroads. He was from Jedburgh in the Scottish borders. In 1824 he secretly married Anne Elizabeth Ayres, who was said to be the heiress of a wealthy soap manufacturer. She had tubercular problems, so they moved to the clean air of the island. In 1829 they bought Ballakilley in Marown, and in honour of his wife's maiden name, Ayre, the property was named Ayrton, or as now, Ayrton. Ty ach beggan smú poini, as jerk ben Ellen mar rose tan a liegenanek. Ty cholen Cummaníl shenek. Tammy gui de ginny tanachtan masen. An Trois le mi Lunason. Schachten Elia soel, gin naiach vai Jonathan. Chonaill eer gesmeintje Hawkins, weisen tammy a glaasjen. O, tammy trestjel de fear na valley ching. Son shigeris na beg a screw. Tammy Jean een screw in St. Jerry egger. Ach, ons acht enjach, Chonaill genoux shigger me. Chonaill gols en acht egger trel jaie. Ach, na jai shall jou screwy egger. Chonaill en a maranach a sen. Chonaill Lucy hul na cadla chwish sa chacht en shochai. Ach, de Gael querchach na vel me tiggle. Eer na cadla, te Jean de veli frail ara orm. Te Prowlus en Doris. As tred te getting macht de veli fo glas, te gulmagiet en chema, de hira nocher. En sheole mi lunasen. Tri le en Elia, as veg genaiacht.
Dolly Pendreath was a mouse old maid. Way, hey, a mouse old maid. She was Cornish of tongue and a fish served by trade. Way, hey, Dolly Pendreath. Lay down them fish gainst the cellar wall. Then don't forget the salt to cover them all. Lay down them fish gainst the cellar wall. There's 7 more baskets from this day's haul. With a cow strapped daily against her back, way, hey, against her back, she moves through the day till dark shadows crack. Way, hey, Dolly Pendreath. Lay down them fish against the cellar wall. Then don't forget the salt to cover them all. Lay down them fish against the cellar wall. There's 7 more baskets from this day's haul. This weight of labour scored lines on her face. Way, hey, lines on her face. All the gathering and carrying all over the place. Way, hey, Dolly Pendreath. Lay down them fish against the cellar wall. Then don't forget the salt to cover them all. Lay down them fish against the cellar wall. There's 7 more baskets from this day's haul. When Dolly was old to be laid in the ground, way, hey, laid in the ground. They found filches in her pockets for her just as she was bound. Way, hey, Dolly Pendreath. Lay down them fish against the cellar wall. Then don't forget the salt to cover them all. Lay down them fish against the cellar wall. There's 7 more baskets from this day's haul. Lay down them fish against the cellar wall. Then don't forget the salt to cover them all. Lay down them fish against the cellar wall. There's 7 more baskets from this day's haul. Woo!
Despite the name Femme de la Mer, that's a Cornish band, and they were singing about Dolly Pendreath. Tan an hiagara seo chit de ve aglach. De bergach vissem an enmus de skriurish, na of all de gol. Vaiden genach den smoeishach. A chnel pecher be a glaas en weg me Jonathan, nirus en skriwen jerenach shen. Gaan nodem mach goil pajagus G, son surrants father. And on the left, the Reverend Stephen points out, a cottage neat with bowers, where roses, eglantines, and laurels gay grow wild, and every passing month is May. Well, that's rather general, but I wonder, is that Cedar Lodge? J.J. Neen's place names of the Isle of Man notes, Cedar Lodge. A cedar tree which grows here is said to be the only one in the island. Ach the jaru Chonaill by Claare na Gael and Shaw. We finish off with Cuivon Vallely on piano and Neil Vallely on concertina, Gliaun and Freyachoin. Chris Pearson will be here with 2 hours of music to chill from 7 till 9, and then at 9 we welcome Judith Lay with Sundown. Cat the Mayash, until the next time then, this is Robert Cutting Carswell, Robert a Carslach.
Old Bobby Bob.
Wishing you a very good night. Eve I'm a Crieriu, as Orsel ye, as my Yirian shed you will you.